The Disney Silver Age, the films the studio released from 1950 to 1967, is fondly remembered for many things. The animation, the influence taken from classic literature, and the pivotal role it played in saving the company are just some of the era's most notable elements. One that seems overlooked is the fact that this was the era where the Disney villains came to prominence. Maleficent, Cruella, Captain Hook, Shere Khan, it was this point in time where the villains start to become just as memorable as the heroes, if not more. While we all love a good Disney villain, one question is burning on our lips. How well would these foes stack up against a court of law? Well, worry no more, because today we'll step into the roles of judge, jury, and executioner and decide the sentences for all your favorite Silver Age baddies. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Sentencing Disney Villains for Their Crimes, the Silver Age. Before we start handing out verdicts, we're going to set a few rules for the uninitiated. First, this video is merely meant for entertainment purposes and not necessarily indicative of what sentences these characters would earn if they existed in the real world. So if you're coming to this video for legal advice, we're sorry to say that you've ended up in the wrong place. Second, to add some fun to the rulings, we're not going to merely judge characters' crimes based on modern standards, but also look at how they'd be treated in their time periods. Finally, we won't be taking anything from the direct-to-DVD Disney sequels into account. While several of these characters were indeed featured in follow-ups, whether or not these films are truly canon varies from person to person. As such, we're going to leave them out for today. Now, it's time to see which classic villains will get off easy and which will likely be regretting their crimes. All rise, for this court is now in session. Starting us off, let's look at the villains of the canine classic 101 Dalmatians. First on the docket are Cruella's bumbling sidekicks, Jasper and Horus. While these lackeys are about as smart as most evil minions in the Disney canon, their crimes are nevertheless pretty heinous and notable. The first charge is breaking and entering, which they do after breaking into Roger and Anita's residence to take the Dalmatians. This directly leads to their next offense, kidnapping. As the film progresses, their numerous attempts to apprehend the pets make them guilty of animal cruelty, and, of course, their involvement in Cruella's evil plan would give them the offense of aiding and abetting.
Can't we see the rest of the show first?
Looking at their crimes as a whole, we ultimately believe that Jasper and Horus deserve 20 years in prison for their actions. Now, you could absolutely make the case that they deserve a harsher punishment. Not only are these crimes terrible, but the film makes it clear that these two are already criminals before ever meeting Cruella, which means it's likely they would have other unknown charges added to their sentence. However, because they're only doing these crimes on behalf of another figure, as well as the fact that they aren't particularly good at their jobs, we don't think it makes much sense to do so. Regardless, Jasper and Horus are two criminals who probably wish they never took on the profession of an evil sidekick. Next is Cruella de Vil. Cruella is guilty of a lot of the same things that Jasper and Horus have done. However, the one that should be mentioned above all others is definitely animal cruelty. 101 counts of cruelty, to be a little more specific. With that in mind, we the jury find it's most appropriate to hand Cruella a prison sentence of 101 years. We should also mention that her extremely reckless driving habits could warrant an additional charge, but when you have over a century of prison time to look to, we felt that it was overkill in this case. In addition to that, since Cruella's whole goal was to use the Dalmatians for her line of coats, it's entirely possible that she would get an even worse ruling for all the other instances of animal cruelty. As she says in the film, she loves fur, so it's likely other animals have suffered because of her.
Now, what have we here?
In conclusion, you can't spell Cruella without the word cruel, and it's that exact offense that gives this villain 101 years in the doghouse. The next film on the podium is Arthurian Legend, The Sword and the Stone. We'll only be discussing one character from this film, and that is Madame Mim. An important thing to know regarding this character is that she is in fact a witch. This alone makes her a pretty notable criminal, as magic and witchcraft were not taken lightly during the Dark Ages, the time period this film takes place in. Beyond that, Madame Mim tries her best to take out the young Arthur, which means attempted murder can also be added to her list of offenses. She also holds him hostage, forcing the wizard Merlin to take action to save him.
She was going to destroy me.
Even after that, she again attempts murder during her wizard duel with Merlin, like when she transforms into a crocodile for the sole purpose of eating him. When you look at her crimes, especially in the era the film is set in, it becomes blatantly obvious that Madame Mim should receive our first instance of the death penalty. As we said earlier, the witch hunt was a major element of the Dark Ages, and those who were suspected of being witches were quickly tried and executed. Mim would be worse off on the account that she's capable of great powers. Her punishment would likely be the same one that most witches faced, being burned at the stake. The Mad Madam Mim might not be one of the most beloved Disney villains of the Silver Age, but her actions make her one of the most notable criminals of them all. We're setting sail for Neverland because next on the stand are the villains of Disney's Peter Pan. Kicking us off is the captain's right-hand man, Mr. Smee. Mr. Smee might look like one of the nicer pirates in Hook's crew, but when you take a closer look at his actions in the film, you'll see that he's just as evil as most of them. First, being an evil sidekick, he's of course guilty of aiding and abetting the main antagonist. In the film's climax, he also participates in the crew's kidnapping of the children. And since he's a pirate, we can go ahead and put piracy down as well.
It's nice to see you smiling again.
Between these three crimes, we think it makes sense for Mr. Smee to spend 25 years in prison. Much like Jasper and Horus, we'll be a little lenient on him because he's a little more than a minion. Besides that, his offenses are also lighter than what those two had done. Still, Mr. Smee is just as dangerous of a pirate as the majority of the members of Hook's ship. Don't let that smile fool you. Next is Captain Hook. Captain Hook is a pirate, so right out of the gate, he's guilty of piracy in the same way Smee is. He's also guilty of kidnapping, as well as attempted murder, which is seen in the film as he tries to destroy Peter Pan. However, one thing that separates Hook from the rest of the villains on this list is that he's the only one who has actually murdered somebody. While it's not dwelled on in the film, Hook does in fact shoot one of his crew members, something we won't be saying about any other villain of the Silver Age.
We must save the lad from himself.
And all because his singing annoyed him. With that kind of reaction, it makes you wonder just how many others have fallen before this captain. So, we think Captain Hook deserves a prison sentence of 50 years. Hook would already be in big trouble for murder, but his profession as a pirate would earn him a harsh punishment on top of that. If Hook lived during the days of pirates, he might even be doing more than wasting away in a jail cell. He could have been sent to the mines and endured a life of indentured servitude. Regardless of his punishment, one thing is for certain, this captain isn't going to be sailing anywhere anytime soon. Next is the fairy tale classic Cinderella. First, we have Drizella and Anastasia. Once again, they're guilty of aiding their nefarious mother as she torments and abuses Cinderella. They also help her in her plot to become royalty when they attempt to put on the glass slipper. Both of these crimes are definitely appalling, but we think there's a lot more to them than meets the eye. While they didn't treat Cinderella with respect, we can't forget that Lady Tremaine wasn't any nicer to them either. While she did see them as her children, she was also manipulative, forcing them to do specific tasks unless they wanted to lose their standing.
Now you two listen to me.
When you look at them with that kind of context, you would also agree that they need a nice round of community service. Anastasia and Drizella might be henchmen, but they don't have the villainy of, say, Jasper and Horus. They merely wanted to please their mother, and though they did some heinous things to achieve that, we don't think it's fair for them to be punished alongside her. Besides, some community service might be just the punishment they need. With how much they forced Cinderella to clean up after themselves, it seems more fitting of a fate than spending some odd years in prison. Now we have Lady Tremaine. While we defended her daughters a lot, we don't have nearly the same sympathy for Cinderella's stepmother. Cinderella has been a part of Tremaine's family for a long time, and in that period, nothing great has come out of their friendship. Tremaine has been abusive towards her since they first met, and time hasn't made her any nicer. She forces her to do every chore, never keeps her promises, and makes her believe she is worthless. She isn't any nicer to her own daughters. She often pits them against Cinderella, like when they rip apart her dress as a way to please their mother. The sisters are scared of Tremaine, which further shows how toxic most of her relationships are.
There is something familiar about her.
Considering the years of emotional abuse she has unleashed on Cinderella, Anastasia, and Drizella, we think it makes sense for her to earn 30 years in prison. Lady Tremaine is a horrible parental figure, and this leads to all three of her children carrying some sort of trauma. When you look at it that way, it seems only right that this wicked stepmother should be locked away for a long time. It's time to take a trip to the jungle, as our next cases belong to the ferocious foes of the Jungle Book. Let's start with Kaa. Kaa only does one criminal act, but despite the lowest count of any character discussed, it's a horrific one to have. Ka repeatedly tries to eat Mowgli, which means he has effectively engaged in attempted murder. For this, we think it's appropriate for him to get 10 years in prison. While we can't say we know how a snake would fare in a cell, we can't imagine it would be a great experience for someone like him. He could get a worse sentence, but since he's pretty bad at what he does, failing to actually eat Mowgli twice, we don't think that's necessarily appropriate in this case.
I'll be right down.
But whatever the decision, we can all rest knowing that the only thing Ka will be eating in prison will be coming off a plastic plate. Next is the cunning and charismatic Shere Khan. Being a tiger, Shere Khan is one of the most dangerous animals in the entire kingdom. As such, it comes as no surprise to find out that he's one of the most dangerous villains to come out of the Disney Silver Age. Like Ka, he's guilty of attempted murder, but not just for trying to kill Mowgli. He also attacks Baloo in the final act, which also means this tiger is guilty of assault.
You're trying my patience.
In addition, his manipulation of Mowgli would add a charge of child endangerment. With how much he hates man, it could also be inferred that he has actually murdered other humans before the events of the film, although that is merely speculation. Given his violent demeanor and vicious actions, we have decided that Shere Khan will be the second villain of the day to earn the death penalty. Shere Khan is a danger to both animals and humans, which is clearly demonstrated in the film, so it's unlikely that his story would get any kind of happy ending. Shere Khan more than lives up to the ferocity tigers are known for, but unfortunately for him, that may have very well cost him his own life. Alright, last but certainly not least, it's time to dig into the Disney gem, Sleeping Beauty. Only one notable villain comes out of this movie, but she's among the most iconic of all Disney villains, and that is Maleficent. Maleficent is a dark fairy capable of great powers. This alone would make her guilty of witchcraft. But unfortunately for her, her sentencing isn't gonna get any easier. Maleficent would likely be tried for treason on account of the curse she enacted on the young Aurora. When the spell is made, she would not only be guilty of attempted murder, but also kidnapping, as she holds the princess hostage in her castle. With all this in mind, it's a no-brainer that Maleficent is yet another villain that will give the death penalty. Witchcraft and treason are crimes you don't want to be associated with, and Maleficent does both in the first scene.
I shall sleep well.
Either one of these would have warranted this punishment, but the fact she does both shows how evil she is. Like Madame Mim, Maleficent's execution would likely come in the form of being burned at the stake. Whether or not that would affect somebody who can literally turn into a dragon is up for debate, but it remains the most obvious fate. Maleficent is often considered one of Disney's most vile antagonists, and when you look at her crimes and the punishment they earn her, it's hard to argue against that. Whether or not she's your favorite villain, she's most definitely the darkest villain to come out of the Silver Age, and her punishment is reflective of that. Alright folks, court is adjourned. Let us know in the comment section if you agree with our choices, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos, but most importantly, stay wicked.